Dan, welcome to the show.
Shaun, pleasure to be here and can't wait for this conversation.
Yes, I'm excited as well. We first met in person at the Shift conference over a month ago. And since then, I was really looking forward to this conversation. I feel the way you think about money, a relationship with money, and especially in the retirement phase of life, aligns with a lot of the ways that I think. And you bring a deep level expertise into the retirement portion of our lives. So I've been looking forward to this. Before we dive into your expertise around retirement, I thought we would start out with a personal story. I understand that someone played a prank on you. And for many of us, we dream and fantasize about winning the lottery, what we would do, how it would change our life. Can you share a moment where you believed you won £1 million in the lottery? What was the first thing that went through your mind?
Yeah, it's really so. I don't know. There was like an emptiness, right? There was this kind of like it's just because I think you're checking whether it's real first up, right? You're kind of going, is it real? Is it real? Checking the thing, is it real? So this was a scratch card, right? You know, you get the scratch cards. So it wasn't like the lotto with the balls coming out. This was a fake scratch card that someone had bought and planted in the thing, right? So it was, and yeah, you don't believe it. Then that sense of kind of, is this true? Then the sense of euphoria. I mean, I think within about 30 seconds, I planned the next 30 years of my life, right? It took me a very short space of time to go, right, I'm spending more time on the golf course. My handicap's going to scratch. I think I've got a chance of playing on tour again at some point. All these kind of boyhood dreams start coming out. I support the kids through this in 30 seconds. And then, yeah, so I think I kind of created the world's fastest financial plan is kind of what happened, I think, at that point. Yeah, then to be met with kind of, you're looking around people's eyes and you're thinking, this ain't like, they're not happy for me. They're kind of like, there's a different reaction from them than I thought they would be. And it all panned out. It was a fake scratch card, which,
Who gave you this scratch card?
yeah, it was a friend as a birthday present. I mean, I should have known, right? I mean, this guy is notorious for this kind of stuff, but I mean, he didn't give it. It was kind of like as part of a group of scratch cards. It was all set up to kind of for me to get the thing and scratch it off. But yeah, it was funny. And actually, what's really interesting, and I kind of mentioned it to you because I think a lot of the work that we do, that sudden money syndrome that we know is that kind of that life event, sudden money that can come through positive and negative situations. Like the glimpse into that, the sinking feeling in your stomach about what the hell is going to happen here and what am I going to do, with some euphoria and some anxiety, all in a very short kind of space of time. And then I think to myself, God, how would I have dealt with that if that was real? Like, actually, if this was like, I've just out of nowhere, this life-changing sum of money is hit. I was like, man, that could cause some real issues. Yeah, we're still friends though. I'm still friends with him. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll go over it.
You know, that last part you talk about with the sudden money, as I was thinking about this, I thought it was interesting that there's this artificially created situation that had you thinking, while it was only 30 seconds, it can at times be profound. After realizing that this was maybe a nasty prank, did this experience, though, as you reflect back, even beyond the 30 seconds, did it reveal any hidden insights about your relationship with money?
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, this was a good few years ago. This was kind of, my youngest was really young. My second wasn't here, so this was 15 years ago. Well before I was as ingrained as I am now in the psychology of money and everything. So kind of thinking back to that, I think it made me realize that my relationship with money was quite superficial and external. This wasn't, the first thing that comes to mind is like a bigger house, better car, more holidays, not kind of like, oh, this could be fundamentally life changing and provide security. I'd spent the thing. And I think that was that realization that you kind of, well, it could, that external spending and that kind of the short-term happiness dopamine hit of spending on something that doesn't have any longevity. I definitely reflected on that because I kind of thought I was better than that. I thought I was a little bit more grounded in this kind of, that wouldn't change and all this stuff, and I wasn't in that moment. And again, I kind of think I would imagine that many people will struggle to be grounded in that moment. I would imagine many people will let years of society, years of life kind of go, do you know what? Now's my time and I'm going to go at this and I'm going to travel and buy and I'm going to spend my way out of problems. And yeah, quite simply, I think that was a realization that it's much more than that. And that could cause many issues, for years to come.
It's really interesting. As you say, it's much more than that. It really highlights, like, this situation highlights this internal, I guess, this internal versus external dance that we have with our money. Your story makes me think about a time I was hiking in the mountains in Canada here, and my friend, he's an outdoors guy. He's like, if we see a bear, don't worry. You just play dead, or like you just stand still and play dead, and they'll go away. And we were walking, and then we saw this rustling in the bush. It was this big black thing, and I was like, oh my Lord, look at that. And he's like, run. So we start running. It turns out it was another guy was hiking. It was this big dog, and it chased us. And after we calmed down, I was like, so much for that playing dead.
Yeah.
But when we're filled with these emotions, they take over.
Yeah.
So you talked about that one.
So
oh, sorry.
No. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's so true when you say you can go, right, here's the plan. And the plan is never baked into reality until you need to execute the plan. Then come to execute the plan and reality hits, the plan never will go to plan because you won't do it because emotions just hit you, right? It's kind of like, it's nuts. And that is like life and money in a nutshell, isn't it? You can have the world's best, most thought out, scientifically evidence-based plan, like lay down, the bear won't come near you, it'll be fine. That's 100% success rate. Evidence all suggests that. Confronted with what you think is a bear, I mean, human brain won't engage in rational thought at that point. Yeah, what an interesting story. I find that fascinating.
It is extremely just fascinating, this idea of we can have the best plans, but when we're tested, it's at times very hard to stick to these plans. Now, in alignment with plans, and you talked about how this was 15 years ago, you've experienced some changes, some evolution in your planning style as a financial planner. We can draw on many, many different ancient forms of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius often talks about accepting the unpredictable nature of life and adapting to its ebbs and flows. From what I have read online in conversations, you've adapted and accepted some changes from your planning perspective as a financial planner. I'm curious, we kind of touched a little bit of 15 years ago with his lottery experience. What was happening internally that, I guess, allowed you to make these shifts from going from a primary external financial planning perspective to more of a human perspective, where I know now your fundamental principle is the human at its core? What was happening inside of Dan that allowed you to accept these changes?
Yeah, I think as you go, I mean, I think you get the real world, real people's experiences and stories have a monumental effect on us as human beings, right? And they had a huge effect on me. So as you kind of as you get to know people throughout the financial planning journey that they go on, and as I become more curious about this, But I can go back. I can go back to some childhood things in a second. I think that might make sense. But we're not when this thing really become real when I'm having what I think are money, kind of money conversations with people, and they're quite superficial, high level, and then one of the partners, this is a real life example, the wife of the husband and wife couple said to me, and I think this was second meeting in about 6 or 7 years ago, Dan, I'd feel much more comfortable talking about my sex life than I would our financial life. And it kind of just, that thing just hit me. I was like, well, this is deep rooted for a lot of people. And then it only takes a few questions to get them to start maybe opening up about some of their experiences. And to me, it was really apparent really early on in my journey as a financial planner that money overarched so many topics of people, so many issues, so many things, so many positives, negatives, all the emotions that we get. Money was kind of one of the central themes as to kind of why they disagreed, why they done that. They, all of the stuff that they were kind of facing had a little bit of a money problem attached to it. And you go, well, actually, for me, if I'm going to do a job and create real value to the people that I'm talking to, then I can give them the best investment strategy in the world. I can create the best cash flow plan in the world, but that will have zero impact if they don't really truly understand about, their relationship with money and the impact, positive and negatively, that relationship can have on their ability to enjoy their time, which their money has enabled them to kind of get back and buy. And so there is some examples of this when in my early financial planning career, when you create what you feel is kind of an unbelievable cash flow plan and investment strategy, and you meet them 12 months after and they're no different. They haven't spent their money, or they haven't done the thing they wanted to do. They're still having the same conversations as a couple about what they're doing and why. And it's like, my God, I've done my job. What's going on here? You've got a wonderful thing and a wonderful thing, and I've shown you're never going to run out, and I've done all the maths bit. And so that I quickly pivoted and went, you know what? Retirement in particular, which is where I spend a lot of my time, but retirement is a human problem, not a maths problem. There's so many people that have enough money to retire, yet they never retire well, because it is all about our relationship with money. Yeah. So that, I think it was the change happened just through people talking to me, kind of going, well, and then the realization, well, actually the work I'm doing is having no impact. Bad. Don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Want to have an impact in the work I'm doing. How do I have an impact? I need to go deeper. I need to understand more. I need to get to the root cause. Otherwise, this thing that they've worked so hard for is never going to be able to give them the life that they want.
Dan, I really appreciate that answer. I queued it up with the Marcus Aurelius comment about accepting, and I highlight that word. As you're describing your story, I have been in many training sessions as a financial planner. I've talked to many people that when we set up these immaculate spending plans, these financial plans, and the client doesn't do it, the client is at fault. The client needs to be fired, etc. The client is non-compliant. In listening to your story, I hear you cultivating a lot of curiosity and accepting that, hey, something else is happening here. And yeah, your story just really shows your willingness to lean in and figure out, wait, what's the real problem here? I think it's really, really interesting that the way you explain that.
Yeah, the point that you made, I think, is the crux of it. And again, I've done a lot of reading around that. I can see the books behind you. We've read a lot of the same books. These deep thinking books around this stuff. And I think being curious allows you to go, what's the real problem here?
Mm-hmm.
because it's a bit like the iceberg, isn't it? It's kind of, the surface level problems are where people will go to first because it's the easiest thing. And we can have a set of wonderful questions as financial planners to ask our clients, but our clients will only give us surface level answers until we get even more curious. Because again, the accepting thing, what I've learned to do is accept that the first, second, and maybe even the third answer is not the problem, or is not the actual answer. It lies beneath the first, second, and maybe even the third answer that they're giving. Allowing a conversation to be had where there is lots of silence and time for them to process what they want to say can be massively transformational in getting them to that level that they need to get to in order to feel like they've almost answered their own question, right? We don't know the answer. It's their life, it's their plan, but people have never had the time and space to talk about this. I mean, I've had coaching sessions with clients about their retirements, and you get that kind of, one of them will say something and the other one will turn around and go, well, hold on, we've been married for 20 years. Why have you never said that to me before? It's like, well, we've never really talked about it, and we've never had the space to go that deep with one another because no one ever kind of goes there. So, and then you get that, I said, you get that little bit beneath the surface answer. That's when you can break some of the cycle. That's when you can connect life with money, and you can then go get, the spending one is the key thing. It's like you're not spending enough is often a deep rooted problem that's 3 or 4 layers below the surface level. And then when you get there, it can be, it doesn't mean the switch is flicked straight away, but we now know we're starting from the right place. This is now not I'm worried about running out of money conversation. This is I saw my dad squander his hard-earned money up the wall because he had a gambling addiction. There's the problem. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we need to go there because otherwise it's just not gonna. It's never gonna get to where it needs to get to.
Again, your answer, I appreciate it. You said something that spoke to me is that they have the answer. Like the client has the answer, as opposed to this viewpoint that the financial planner knows best. You need to listen to me. And I would assume that lens that the client has the answer is what allows you or provides you the invitation to go deeper. Can you just speak to that experience on the client? Because we always talk about money's taboo. We don't want to talk about it. But I think you and I both know if we create the environment that the client feels safe, trusted, they actually really want to talk about their money. They just, to your words that you used, they haven't had the space to go to that level before. So maybe just speak about your process or your lens or your view on how financial planners can get that invitation to go deeper.
Yeah, I think there has to be a kind of a natural, you have to be naturally curious to want to go there. I think that's really, really important. I think you have to be a little bit bold and brave and maybe a little bit stubborn in your attitude. I think for me anyway, some of my most transformational conversations that I've had with people have come in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm still trying to figure this out, right? I mean, it's kind of getting better all the time. But the realization for me is that, like, as you said, they have the answer and I have the ability to listen. And if I listen really, really well, I've then got the tools to be able to help them achieve everything they want to do. So that kind of realization that there is an ability to step out of this. This is not just going to be like deep rooted therapy that we're going to go down some sort of, negative spiral. Try and keep it positive. I'm a big, believer of positive psychology and the PERMA model and all that stuff that all of that shows. But giving people the time and space to do it allows you allows us as financial planners, I think, to actually do things quicker for the client, right? We can get our clients to the place they want to be quicker because we're not scooting around the edges. I do set it up in a way, though, Shaun, that I mean, I'm pretty upfront with people in terms of, look, um, I, I'm going to try and go deep here because it's really, really important. If you ever feel uncomfortable, you just need to tell me and we can take a pause. This is not about being uncomfortable. This is about making sure that we're getting the right information out. And realizing that it might not just be a one and done thing. These conversations, I mean, I've got clients that are telling me stuff now, 18 months, 2 years after working with them, that only now are they feeling really, really comfortable in doing so. So we just need to appreciate everyone's pretty unique with
Your perspective. I like it so much. That last part, everybody's unique. And in an industry where for a while we were like, here's my process. You client, you need to fall into my or like my specific style. I'm just hearing you saying that, no, I'm going to hear that you're a unique person. While you might have your like a similar process to unearthing that information, the point you made about you have the tools, I think depicts this perfect harmony dance that the client has the information, you have the tools, and together you collaborate and create this wealthy retirement. This brings me to a question here. Is your mission statement is you aim to help generations of retirees grab life and experience true wealth. I want to underscore this wealth. I hear you're doing this dance with the clients that are unearthing information. You have the tools to find, to seek, to experience, whatever the word we want to use, wealth. What does wealth mean to Dan?
Yeah, I mean, wealth. I tell you what, it doesn't mean. Wealth
Mhm.
doesn't mean money, right? Wealth is part. So to me, what wealth is time. I mean, money's part of wealth, right? But people confuse, being rich with being wealthy, or that they confuse the two things. And actually, and I don't know the exact definition, but the word wealth actually originated from something that has nothing to do with money. It's a well-being, isn't it? The word wealth comes from a total well-being point of view. We, as a modern society, have just attached the word wealth and wealthy to being rich and having lots of money and assets and things. And unfortunately for us as a modern society, we're all buying into this a little bit now, and it's kind of like we see wealth as a yardstick, a measure to kind of measure ourselves against, and it's only defined by what people have got or perceived to have had to have. So, look, wealth to me is a time, money, social connections, and freedom. I think you can have, to me, the wealthiest people that I work with are often the ones that don't have the most amount of money. They figured out how they're going to spend their time. They figured out who's most important to them. They figured out who they want to be. They figured out their purpose. They figured out their social connections, their tribe, all this stuff. They are the wealthiest people because they fill their time with things that they really, really, really want to do. They enjoy spending some of their money, but they enjoy spending it on things that make them happy. It's not, you know, there's a surefire way to not be wealthy, and that is to spend your money on things to impress other people. That will mean that your bank balance will go down, and your emotional, capabilities, your kind of how you feel internally, will make you feel really yucky eventually. And so, kind of, I reverse engineer that. So how do you do that? Well, only spend your money on things that make you happy. Spend your time with people you want to spend it with, build those social connections, and get that true wealth outlook on life.
In your conversations with your clients, are you talking about having them define wealth from their own perspective? How, and if so, how have you noticed or observed clients shift perhaps from this like external lens of what, modern society teaches us what wealth or riches, to maybe shine that perspective to be like, oh, it's like an embodiment of my whole self. Can you just maybe speak, whether it's a client example specifically or just holistic transition, I guess, your clients go through?
Yeah, I think it is a transition they go through. Again, I often deal with people that have diligently saved, that have led a decent life, that have enjoyed good things, but have often replaced their money they're spending with a decent salary or wage, or whatever they get, right? So they've enjoyed their money, but they often come again to us with a money problem that they believe is the answer to the solution of retirement. And when we dig deeper, there's often some really crucial realization moments in that conversation with them where we go, right, you're starting now to define how you're going to spend your time. How does that make you feel? Who are you going to spend it with? How does that make you feel? How would you feel if you couldn't do these things? And we start to kind of make sure that they understand what it means to be wealthy and happy and content in retirement. Because again, that again unique to them, right? That's not you need to have these four things, everybody. I mean, there are some commonality between some of this, but it's unique to everybody. I mean, and so it's not the journey that I intentionally set up for people. I'm not going to go, oh, by the way, I'm going to take you from thinking that it's about spending money on stuff to kind of here. I don't think that would do anyone any favors if you kind of told them what you're going to do. I think I know that I'm going to take the people, some more than others, on that journey as we really over time distill things down to what is most important to them and how they want to spend their time. Quite often it's transformational quite early on. When we start doing a vision board, we start getting them to fill out how they're going to think about spending their time, what's most important to them, going through some exercises around this. And actually for the first time, they've actually thought about what's most important, which is really interesting, like what's most important. And then they do it together as a couple with me just sitting back, and between them, they're kind of clearing the forest. They're doing it themselves, right? And it's like, yeah, that's cool. And I can pick on the bits I want to, right? Yeah, that's cool. Take that, move it out of the way. And focus. What does that mean? Focus a bit more on that. And it just helps them clear the weeds themselves to what's most important. And that can be really transparent. And what's really interesting and I'll give you an example in just a second, when this goes amazingly well, the answer to how much is enough is so much lower than what they thought it was. Because what they absolutely want and need to spend their money on in retirement comes so much more central to the importance to them and their focus and their happiness. And they realize that it actually isn't huge amounts of money. There might be certain things they want to do and they dream and they want to, do things while time and health is on their side. But there's a purpose for this all. There's a purpose. They want to come out to Canada to watch the Stanley Cup final or something like that, right? It's kind of, but they want it, but they've had a dream, they wanted to do it. Like, go and do it. Have experienced the happiness of traveling and doing things. Don't just do things for the sake of it. And when we start pinpointing these things they've always wanted to do, and with the people they've always wanted to do it with, they realize that this isn't an amount of money that is, huge amounts that we need to constantly fund this external happiness. We need to fund internal memories and experiences. And that probably doesn't cost as much as what we think it's going to cost when we truly understand what is important.
Dan, many different angles we can take from this, but as you were answering this question, I could tell why you are so passionate about working with this set of this demographic of individuals. Everything you changed, you leaned right into the mic. I think it's refreshing to see how much you care. You've got me thinking about this retirement idea, which I want to touch on a quote I heard you say about retirement and how it's not It's flawed. But before that, we have this idealized retirement lens. You know, these we're gonna sit on these chairs looking at this ocean or lake or wherever you are, and we're gonna sit and create bucket lists and spend our whole retirement traveling the world doing bucket list items. Based on your real experience with talking to real people, helping real people retire, what do you think we are actually looking for in retirement? And what does an real retirement like day to day actually look like? And this question comes from, I feel that there's, I guess, a misalignment with what people are actually seeking for in retirement and what they think retirement should be. So, can you just speak based on your experience with clients?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting you brought this up. If all we've got to do is leisure and play, then leisure and play can become boring really quickly. And I see that and hear that a lot. And I think it's because there's a narrative that the media, the financial industry, pushing down people's throats. This kind of like picture of people kind of just constantly on leisure time. Don't get me wrong, retirement is a time that you can do more leisure activities. So yeah, I think that's the first point I would make. It's if your time is just consisting of leisure activities, I think you're going to find that pretty boring pretty quickly, and it will turn into a job. I mean, I love my golf, but if I played golf every day, um, you know, I would get, and I didn't play very well, then I'd be horrible to be around, right? It becomes a chore, it becomes a job, it doesn't
Mhm.
become fun anymore. So look, retirement is flawed. We've got this concept of retirement in our head that it is kind of time of leisure, etc. But what we have to realize is the fundamental human nature of what defines us and gives us purpose. And what defines us and gives us purpose is not laying on a beach all of the time. Meaningful work, impactful work, being social with other human beings, having some structure and schedule and all of this stuff makes us much better, growing and learning. Like human beings, that we like to grow and learn, right? We like to absorb new information, and we like to feel like we're moving forward a lot. And I think the misconception here is that we get to an age, and then the whole kind of journey of learning and all of that stuff stops, right? I'm now out of work, so what's the point in learning anymore? And what's the point in in going to a seminar? And what's the point in doing this? I'm just now going to go off here. And we see it as a finish line and a decline rather than the start line of a new era for us to be able to go, well, actually, now I've got opportunity to learn things that I've always wanted to learn. So here's some stories. One of my clients, Andy Murphy, who has been a guest on my podcast, he is hugely passionate about music and has never been able to get his record collection up to where it wanted to be. He never went and saw some gigs because he's always busy at work. He's now doing that stuff. He was a very passionate, but in his own words, not very good cook. He wanted to go and learn how to cook. Nothing Michelin star, just want to cook some nice meals at home, right? So he's been on a couple of courses to be able to go and learn how to cook certain different cuisines. He loves his art. He's enrolled in a course to study fine art. He's always wanted to do it, like for 30 years, never had the time, never had the ability to do it. He had a very good job, high profile, worked for a big bank over here, quite stressful, and was very well known and committed to that work. So just didn't have the headspace. This is a time of reinvigoration. He has absolutely taken this, and the journey he went on was very similar to the one that we talked about. This is a maths problem. I just need to get out of work. I feel burnt out and all this stuff. Didn't have a clue what he was retiring to. And we've done a huge amounts of work with him and his wife and his family for them to understand what the next phase of life looks like. Hadn't been abroad for 10 years, but earned good money. Hadn't been on holiday. And sends me pictures of him on holiday now. It's kind of like, this is cool. Realizing those passions is really important, and spending our money on those passions and learning and all of that stuff. We can combine all of that. I say for the first time since we were children, retirement gives the opportunity to feel free and be curious about exploring who we want to be. And that's you've got it. Surely everyone should want to take advantage of that. It's a really difficult thing to do, really challenging thing to do, but when done well, my God, can it lead to some amazing outcomes?
I feel like you're creating a new tagline for retirement: to explore who we want to be. It's quite profound. I'm thinking here now, I've heard you talk and read online about these different phases in retirement. And while the actual ages can give or take, I like this idea that you talk about phases. And the reason why this is popping into my head now, there might be listeners being like, okay, you guys have been talking a lot about this idea of time, social connections, freedom, traveling, doing artistic things like Andy here. What about the money? Like, we need some money still. And
Yeah.
to your point earlier, financial planners like yourself have the tools. Can you kind of marry the idea that, yeah, we do need money with the different phases? Because it seems to me you're a believer in each phase has different, I guess, demand or amount of money that's required. So maybe can you just broadly speak about these retirement phases and how the money meshes with these purposeful things that we're talking about?
Yeah. Look, I think one of the best maths jobs that I do and we do as people that work with with retirees as retirement planners is on income. Right, that's one of the best maths jobs. A lot of anxiety will be built up on, how can I spend my money and how can I make sure that I consistently always feel comfortable to spend my money on the things that are important to me. And I can touch on that in a second. So that's a really, really important part of this, right? Again, there's no point doing a load of really hard work and soul searching and figuring this thing out if you are going to react to very short-term market movements and not spend your money on the things that are really important to you, right? So that's the beauty of actually holistically looking at this from a lifestyle and a numbers point of view. But the phases are important, and there are a couple of ways that the simple way to think about retirement in phases is in 3 phases, and that is the go years, go slow years, and no go years. And that's a really simple way to think about it. And you can overlay that with something a little bit more broken down. And I would say that, and I've called this kind of a rapturous retirement. And you've got kind of the pre-rapture phase, which is kind of in your maybe mid 40s, early 50s. You're in a 10-year window. You're probably your peak earnings. You're doing really well, but you are starting to think about what life after work kind of means, right? So you're probably saving pretty hard, but you might be spending pretty well as well. Kids are flying, they've left the nest, you've got a bit more free time with you and your spouse, and you're starting to figure this thing out. You then go into the transition phase, which I think is like really challenging, right? The transition from full-time work, long-standing career to something else. But if done very well, we then go into the rapture phase. So you've then got this really nice phase as you kind of enter, you come out of the transition, you've done a load of hard work on who you are and who you want to be, and you've thought about your purpose, and you've thought about how you're going to spend your money and time, and you've come out of this and you've got this really, really cool rapture phase. And that to me is your go-go years, right? That is when time and health is on your side. That is when your health span is at its greatest. So one thing I talk a lot about is that there's a massive difference between lifespan and health span. We are alive longer, but it doesn't mean that our health is supporting a kind of an active or even, normal-ish lifestyle. There's a lot of research in the States and some over here that suggests that at the end of our health span, there's about 12 to 13 years of life left after that. And our health span will deteriorate as we get older, right? So, 1 year at age 60 is different to 1 year at age 70. So our health will span will decline. So you've got those go-go years or the rapture phase. You then would go into kind of maybe a post-rapture phase, which is when our health is deteriorating a little bit. We're slowing down, the go slow years, where we're going, actually, we're still relatively healthy, but sitting on a cruise for 3 months, or flying halfway around the world for 22 hours, or, I don't know, jumping out of an aeroplane, or whatever it might look like that you want to do, those things are probably beyond you from a physical health point of view and a mental health point of view. Things become a little bit more foundational. Time outside, time with grandchildren, maybe a little bit more less physical demanding work that doesn't require as much money to go and achieve. And then you get into the kind of this, what I call fragility, right? And the hardest thing for people to accept is those later life, no-go fragility years. If we're lucky enough to live past our health span, there will be a period of time when we will enter into fragility, where we can't and won't want to really do that much. And I think that sense of reality is really, really important to speak to people about, to enable them to bring themselves into the present, to understand that they need to spend their money hardest whilst their time and health is on their side, because at some point, all you're going to be worrying about is heating your house and maybe having 1 or 2 meals a day. Now, I know that we can talk about care costs and all of that stuff, which we can, but ultimately, as a framework, what we need to do is understand that our spending pattern be in line with how our healthy years and our longevity will be. And there's loads of research coming out now. This modern day retirement, Shaun, is so new. It's only like this, defined contribution pension schemes. There's this pot of money that people have total responsibility on to draw on. What's that, 30 years old, 40 years old? There's now, we've got about 20, 25 years worth of data now that suggests to us that real-time spending in retirement falls by about 1% a year. So we know that you spend less in your 80s than you do in your 70s than you do in your 60s. Just naturally, that will decline. So why do we want to build financial plans that show this ever inflation-proofed level of income to make sure you're never going to run out of money? It's just not reality. You want to understand that you will get old. If you're lucky enough to get there, you will get there, and you will become fragile and you won't be spending a lot of money. So when you're 60 to 70 and you're healthy and you've got time and you can be quite active and you can do all these things, you need to go then.
Very good, Dan. You said this idea of bringing into the present, and that really spoke to me, that this model or these frameworks, I think that's what it's doing. It's giving us permission to be in the present. Those go-go years, as you described them, they're fleeting. I was chatting to a retired couple a couple weeks ago, and they're just talking about how the realization that I've been saving my whole life and I actually have to start spending this money traveling. I'm going to actually book a tour agency. We're not going to do it ourselves. We're actually going to pay someone to do this. And they felt good about it because the idea of like finality was actually coming into their minds, not, 85, 90, but more so like 75, 76.
Yeah.
It'll be hard to travel at that point.
Absolutely.
You talk a lot about the permission. Sorry, you go on.
No, I was going to say, I think people are too focused on the end, like the death, right? They're too focused on the not as that couple rightly said, not on there'll be a time when you can't. Doesn't mean it has to be the end, right? That's really, really important.
Your phases, I think create these artificial endings. I mean, not artificial because they are endings, but they visually allow
Hmm.
someone to see that, yeah, this is a phase. There is
Yeah.
an ending to this phase. It brings me to something that I've heard you talk a lot about, is the psychology of spending retirement. Starting to save is a difficult thing. We know it amongst all the busy competing priorities, children, etc., expenses. It's hard to get savings going. Then we get our savings going. We become a habit about saving. And then, as you talk about this transition period, we have to change our psychology around spending. I want to touch on this and your experience on that transition, because our conversation is really highlighting the fact of, if we don't transition our thinking to spending, we might miss those go-go years, which are really important in our retirement. So can you just speak onto your experience on helping people transition from saving to spending?
Yeah, look, I mean, I could probably spend another 49 minutes on this. I think what's really important is to understand what's at stake. Excuse me. And often people procrastinate, leave it too late, and as you said, kind of end up just sailing through those go-go years, and they get to a point and the realization hits, oh, I should have spent more. Oh, and now I can't. So that's kind of what's at stake here. And you're right. What this is, and what I say to people and how I phrase this, is that one of the most challenging things that you will do as you transition into and live your retirement is to move from a savings habit to a spending mindset. And not only will that be filled full of stuff that you've acquired personally in terms of how you've observed other people and all this stuff, but you would then have learned behaviors from parents. How your parents retired and how they were with money will have a massive, and some maybe other closer family members, will have a big impact on how you treat and spend your money. And also the other thing, and we mentioned the sudden money thing at the start of the conversation. How you acquire your money has a massive impact about how you're going to spend it. Personal story, and I've said this on a couple of things I've done before, but my wife's mum passed away about, was it nearly 16 years ago, when she was pregnant with our first. So it's really sudden, really out of the blue, and really sad. And my wife's mum had some money in some shares for the company that she worked for. Not a lot, about £15,000, that was left to Diane, my wife, right? Guess where that £15,000 still is? It's like, it's not been spent. It's not my wife's money. It's been acquired through heartbreak, right? So how we acquire our money is a real challenge. Whether that and that can be if we've worked so hard to get this thing, and what we've done over the last 20 years has caused this rift and that thing, but we've eventually got there. That, I mean, to just flick the switch 180 degrees from that moment to go, I'm now retired, I'm now going to spend it. There's so much emotional baggage tied up in that pot of money that you've acquired over a long period of time. To just go, oh, by the way, I'm going to have my retirement party on a Friday night, and I'm going to wake up Monday morning and book a cruise around the world. It just doesn't happen. Nobody does it. It's so challenging. So we need to understand that first. You mentioned the word permission. Give ourselves permission as people to understand this is really, really, really difficult. And there are many things that we're going to fight, and there are many things that will go against human nature in terms of feeling like we're depleting capital. That is a tough thing. I've had people come to me and go, oh, don't worry, Dan. And when we talk about spending and we create spending plans, and I talk about, how we're going to start to think about spending our money and all that, don't worry, Dan, I can spend money like no one's business. I've got no problem spending money. I'm like, no. You've got no problem spending money that you're going to replace with a salary, right? You're now not going to ever replace this money. How does that feel? That's a bit different, right? So it's a real challenge. But I think some of the things that I really like to do, I need to talk about what's at stake. And the research out there suggests that people are more fearful about running out of money than they are wasting their life. Because running out of money has deep-rooted social consequences, right? It means that we failed. It means that we didn't work hard enough in the first place. It means that I've probably spent money on things I shouldn't have done. And it means that we're a failure. It means destitution. We catastrophize. We're going to lose the house, live in a cardboard box, all that. Like, the brain will go to failure. So what's the easiest thing to do is to go, do you know what? I'm going to be really cautious and conservative with this because I don't want to be a failure. I've worked too hard to be a failure. That's kind of what I hear, right? Well, actually, if you end up at age 90 and you still got 70% of your net wealth on the table, you've also failed there as well. So we need to bring it, and that's reality. There is research over here that suggests that someone retiring at age 60 on average will get to age 90, a 30-year retirement, and have only spent 30% of their starting net wealth. People are so scared about running out of money that they just don't spend it. And these people are people that don't often sit down with people like me and you to really get to the root cause of this stuff, to build retirement income plans that mean that it's baked in reality and they can spend their money up front, knowing that they can take care of stuff at the end, knowing that they can give away their money with a warm heart and not a cold hand, i.e. don't wait till the end to see this. If we want our money to make us happy, one of the top 3 things we can do with our money to make us happy, give it to someone else. Like, baked in all neuroscience, like, give it away and see the impact of that gift. And so, I think the main point to me is that I try and hit people with evidence, right? It's the evidence around real-time spending falls, the evidence around health span and lifespan, the evidence around average, on average, people simply do not spend down their capital, and then overlay more of a behavioral income strategy on top of that basically forces them to spend their money on the things that they really want to spend it on, and will take away all of the risk around, short-term volatility in the markets to allow them to go and spend their money. Which finally, what I will say is, ultimately what we want to try and do is, I think, financial planners, is minimize that regret risk at the end. So this is going to, what I don't want is for someone to get to a point and go, my God, I didn't spend enough. I now can't spend it. Look at all those things I could have done. I've left memories and experiences on the table. The pounds or dollars doesn't matter. It's the stuff they've left behind. And so if we can show them the consequence, and again, this is so new, Shaun, right? This is there's only 20, 30, 35, maybe even 40 years worth of data now showing us this stuff. And that's quite exciting for me, because I can present this data to them and show them this isn't hearsay anymore. And yeah, that has the most impact on people. Facts, data, showing them what's at stake, and working with them to really understand what they're going to spend their money on, and then revisiting that every year to go, what's next? What's next? What are we doing? That's really, really important. People need accountability partners on this stuff. It's such a challenge, right? It's such a challenge.
You're absolutely right. We could spend another 45 minutes on this or more on that one section. You said, the fear of people reconciling that I have left memories and experience on the table. That one spoke to me. For individuals, as we come to an end here, I want to respect your time. As individuals approaching, say it's phase 1 or phase 2 in our little retirement model that we talked about, based on the conversations you've had, the research that you've done, what overarching advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think, please go and find someone that can work with you on this. It's so vital, right? Find someone that you trust, find someone independent in terms of their, that you've got some independent thought that isn't you. We all have our own inherent learned behaviors and biases that we struggle with. I know during times of short-term market volatility, I should not be checking my portfolio. I've read every book under the sun. Guess what I did during COVID? I was like looking at it daily, thinking, what the hell is going on here? Right? We all know it doesn't matter. So we all have these things.
We all
So
run from the bear.
we all run from the bear. Yes, exactly. Good. That's what good comedians do. Link it back to the punchline. And so there's a couple, but I think that, you know, the number one reason for me why people don't retire well is because they don't spend anywhere near enough time planning and thinking with intention about what they're retiring to. They spend far too much time worrying about what they're retiring from, and they don't spend enough time planning what they're retiring to. Because ultimately, there are two things, right? So my advice to people is to figure out these two things. How are you going to spend your time, and how are you going to fund it? But you can't answer question number two until you fully explored and answered question number one. So that would be my tip. Really, really think about what you're retiring to, how you're going to spend your time, who you want to spend it with. And then the money will take care of that for you, will take care of that stuff for you, and wrap itself around that first kind of first part of planning.
Really appreciate that, Dan. You know, what are we retiring to? It's an important thing to think about. I can tell that you have deeply thought about the many layers of the iceberg. As the conversation went on, I could see parts that really spoke to you and really engage you. This idea of a wealthy life, wealth, like fundamentally beyond the dollars and cents, really radiates through this conversation. As a dad myself, I'm wondering how, if anything at all, did becoming a father change your outlook on what wealth is? I know this question seems to come out of left field, but I get the essence that your experience of wealth has changed. Thus,
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of the reason why you're so dedicated to the work you do.
Yeah, I think any parent that you speak to says it's foundational stuff, right? Life becomes more. There's this thing, isn't there, about Brian Portnoy, who's I think you know Brian, who's a friend who's wrote a great business called Shaping Wealth, who talks about this stuff and wrote The Geometry of Wealth. He talks about funding contentment, and I love that phrase. And I think what ends up happening is that real contentment comes from finding reasons for being that are more than just you. So, you know, prior to having children, I was eating my own cooking, so to speak, right? You were just the reason for being was a very selfish reason for being. Went to work, earned, spent on me, bought stuff for me, done things for me, you know, all the timings and all of that stuff is kind of like get up when I want to get up, da da da. And so the sense of like us as in we come alive as human beings when we have a sense of belonging that is more than just us. And therefore that definition of wealth when it comes to the kids, it's kind of like, well, there is a sense of urgency about trying to help and provide, right? You want to make sure that, so getting up in the morning has new meaning, and doing the work that you want to do has new meaning. But there's also, I've never had to set an example to people that I truly love before, really, right? You maybe set an example, trying to set an example to work colleagues and all of this stuff. And again, I think that's a pure vanity point of view, right? You're not doing it because you really love them. You're doing it because we quite like the adulation that gives us, right? But you're now trying to set an example. So you want to go, you know, I'm the example of living life properly and trying to get that ingrained into people really early on, the kids, because it wasn't with me as early as it should have been. And it took me a huge amount of time to understand that, figure out what's important. We talked about retirement, right? But everything I talk about can be applied at any stage of life, any stage, right? It just so happens to be that for most people, the best stage that they've done it at, because they've got there and haven't done it before, is going to be their retirement. but actually thinking about living a life of authentic or being authentic, thinking about identifying purpose, thinking about who you want to be, thinking about what makes you happy, thinking about where you want to spend your money and your time. If we can get that ingrained into 20, 30-year-olds early, I think the world's going to be a much better place. And so, yeah, that responsibility of kind of trying to go, do you know what? I've got some years of wisdom and learning that I sometimes get across to the public. But maybe my sense of responsibility is for actually people where there is a true kind of, this is higher and greater than me.
Dan, once again, your answers, I love them. My final question that I've asked everyone on the podcast, I think it's going to elaborate that greater sense of purpose you just ended on. Let's now imagine that you're at end of life, however old that is the age you are. And you're sitting on the front porch, looking out at a view that brings you total peace, ease, and contentment. Could be an ocean, meadows, mountain, it doesn't matter. Something that just evokes this feeling of peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to bring out a notebook and write a letter to your children's children on what you learned is a key to have a happy, healthy relationship with money. What would be one theme of that message?
It would be that your time is worth more than your money. Earn money by doing something that you love and use that money to do even more of it.
That is wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I might write that down myself.
That was quite profound. Time is worth more than money.
Yeah. I think, look, just, how old are your kids, Shaun?
5 and 8.
Yeah. So mine are 16 and 13. And I worry about the influence that this modern world has on our children. And therefore, I think that statement rings true for me and how I'm thinking at the moment. I don't think they're not looking at things correctly at the moment. There's too much influence of this social stuff that's going on. And so really early on, if we can get something along those lines and help them do this, I think that could be quite good for them.
I agree. Well, Dan, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with myself and my audience. Can you please share more about your wonderful podcast, Humans vs. Retirement, and all the other fantastic work that you're doing? Where can people find you?
Yeah, really simple, humansversusretirement.com. So that's humans vs retirement.com. And that's where pretty much all of my work sits. You'll find all the podcast episodes, all my blogs, my sketches. So I like to draw. I'm a visual kind of guy. I think there's now 50 sketches all around money and retirement and these topics that we talked about. So all free to download. So go and have a look at those. And then I write out once a week. I call it the Super Sunday Retirement Roundup. And I try and get a little bit punchy on a Sunday morning, 9 o'clock UK time, summarize a few things that I've done over the week and some thoughts that I've heard. So all of that's on the website. You can sign up for all of that stuff. But yeah, go and have a look and go and have a listen, have a read, download a few sketches and sign up for the roundup.
I'll include all that in the show notes. And yes, your sketches are fantastic. I like how they break down a nice concept into a visual piece of art. And I say art with intention because they are art.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like loosely. It's art with intention, right? But you know, it's there. It's there. I think some
art
of them
is
are quite
an interpretation.
It's better than some of the art that I've seen go for thousands and thousands of pounds. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shaun. Really love the conversation. Thanks for being a wonderful host.